Yes.
All right. So what I would do is I would first give a kind of overview of the budget. So I'm not going to be looking at any particular chapter because we have presenters over here. And so what I would do is I would just start with a few thoughts, and they're more than one thought. The first one is, as you know, the budget of public schools is close to 50% of the entire budget of the county, and it is overseen by school board members who serve part-time and are paid a pittance as a salary. I strongly believe that. The board does not have an independent inspector general, so the board is entirely dependent on the very bureaucrats who run the system, and I don't mean bureaucrats in a negative way, I'm just using that as a term. And this is for a budget of over $2 billion. So at town hall meetings that I've been to and at various budget hearings, whenever you hear some people talking, representing the various clusters like Whitman and so forth, they always say we want more teachers, we want more teachers, we want more teachers. So I'm going to be focusing a bit on that in my overview. So let's get to the budget. What I'm going to do is every few minutes I'm going to give you a point on which you can ponder. And these are going to be called points to ponder, and they will give you some kind of background to think about when you hear the various presenters give their analysis of each chapter. So, as you know, the budget approved by the board for fiscal 2016 is $2.39 billion. It's a 4.1 increase from last year. It will serve a student population of 156,514 with a staff of over 21, with employees of over 21,000. So in dollars, this increase equates to $93.3 million. So that's an increase of almost $100 million for 2,600 additional students. So I did the math on that and I said, wow, that's about $38,000 per student. But generally speaking, that's what it would be. So I said, that can't be right. And then I decided, let me calculate what the budget would or should be if we follow the maintenance of effort law. Now, I'm sure every single one of you knows about the maintenance of effort law, right? Okay, but I'd like to get a bit mad for a short while and tell you what I don't like about the maintenance of effort law. So as you know, it's based on a formula, so they take per pupil cost of the current year and multiply it by the number of new students who they will be adding to the system. Now, why we have a problem with that is there is no other service in the county whose budget is based on population increases. So there's an increase in the homeless. There's no mandated law that says you have to increase the budget. If there's an increase in number of people asking for public assisted housing, no law that says you have to give them more even though the population has gone up. And if library usage goes up, no, you don't increase the library's budget because there's no law that says so. Another problem with the maintenance of effort law is if the county does not fund the school system at the maintenance of effort level, the state can come in, grab our income taxes, and force us to cover the difference. So the first point to ponder is the maintenance of effort law a good thing? Now, in the okay, at least one person. Those of us who are in the Taxpayers League, we really believe it's a flawed law. I hope I pronounce that correctly. Flawed, the American, flawed as in F-L-A-W-E-D. Okay.
Very diplomatic word.
It's a flawed law. And the reason being, there are many reasons, but for this particular budget, I mean, what it does is, and I don't think the educational establishment, when they decided to fight for this law, thought about the long-term implications. Because what it does is, if it does not in any way incentivize the county in the form of the executive or the council to raise the budget of the public schools above and beyond maintenance of levels. Because why? That will then rebase the per pupil cost in perpetuity and artificially increase the budget of the public schools forever. So actually that's one of the things I don't think they thought about. But let's go back to the cost per pupil. In Montgomery County, it is close to $10,000 a student. You may have seen a number such as 14,000, but that's when you look at all sources of revenue. This is strictly from local revenue. So if you look at the number of additions to the student population, which is projected to be 2,600 more this coming year, the budget should actually increase by 26 million. So the second point to ponder is, why is the board asking for close to 70 million over and above what the county is mandated to give under maintenance of level? Just ponder that for a while. A few more macro questions and start putting on your pondering hat. Do you know that MCPS is the only school system in the entire state of Maryland that gives its teachers a 2% supplemental for its pensions over and above the regular pension? And yes, this is in the current MCPS budget. So how much do you think this cost in? I have the numbers for 2013. They must be higher now. It cost $30 million. So the point to ponder is, why are we doing this? Do you think that new hires into MCPS say, oh, we're going to take the job because we're going to get a 2% pension supplemental? I don't think so, and I'm pretty sure most of them don't even know it exists. So, do you know what $30 million would buy? It would buy 300 new teachers each year. Think about that. Next, did you know that MCPS budget includes the school system share of the healthcare premiums for its employees? Now, I know in the federal government, employees pay 28% of their healthcare premiums. I know in Montgomery County government, they pay 25%. In the school system, it just went up from 5% to 10%. However, if the employees in the school system pay the same share of their healthcare premiums as do their counterparts in the government, in Montgomery County government, in 2013, that number was close to $40 million. You know how many teachers that would buy? Well, even if it were 20 million, you would get 200 new teachers. Okay, next question. Point to ponder. Did you know that a 1% pay raise in MCPS equates to $15 million? This budget has a 2% general wage increase and a close to 2% step increase. So that's close to 4%. So if they did not get if they got 1% less than this 4%, we would save $15 million.
50 or
15. So how many more teachers would you get? 150 more teachers. So I'm trying to answer the question that people will say we want more teachers. And this is without asking for an increase in funds. Now there's three areas I did not look at because I didn't have the numbers, and so I didn't want to spout numbers that were not accurate. And we keep asking ourselves why it is that certain administrative functions of the school system are not consolidated with those of the county, or vice versa. Because there's some actions in the administrative area that one would think are similar. Procurement might be one, another would be transportation. The school system buys buses, the county buys ride-on buses. Supplies, books, libraries buy books. So overall, there's something we really need to look into within the taxpayers league about what consolidation would save. There may be a problem because since education is a state subject, not a local subject, there may be some problems with the way that might require a change in law. But I think we would get enormous savings because I looked at the budget for IT, it's $46 million. I looked at the budget for transportation, it's $108 million. Now those are not savings because they are used for certain things, but I'm thinking if you consolidate it, you could get savings. So in conclusion, did you know that the county funds the school system for several items that are outside the MCPS budget? That is, they're not funded by the school system, but they are for the direct benefit of the school system. They are things such as school nurses, police officers, debt service, IT modernization. This adds up to $270 million. So that's $250 million that does not show up in the school's budget. And the reason I want this to make this a point to ponder is most people don't realize that the school budget is not just what they get, but there's additional $250 million that is added to them. So the question is the school system being funded an additional $250 million that does not show up in their budget? you don't have to ponder long about that. The answer is yes. So with these thoughts in mind, I will leave you with two words in Latin, and I looked them up. Caveat publica. I was looking for the word for taxpayer. It's actually, in Latin, there is no real word for taxpayer. The word for taxpayer, the closest equivalent is rich man, and I didn't think any of us were rich after we paid our taxes, so I decided to use public. So caveat publica. Thank you.
Okay, now Gordy Brennan, the Vice President of the Taxpayers, so he's going to talk about Chapter 1.
Okay, did everybody get a handout? I'm an accountant, and so I live in the world of numbers. English is a second language for me. You'll see typos, spelling errors, grammar errors, all those kinds of things. Whenever there are words, the numbers, I try to get right. I'll explain in a couple areas where I'm not even sure about the numbers. This chapter deals with the core business process of the school system. That's delivering education to kids K through 12. And this is instruction. I looked at the budget, which is just shy of $1 billion, and could only trace 16% of it to academic strategies. That's the first observation. Now, I'll tell you, it gets a little better when you go into the program budget, which is an alternate universe, if you will, to this budget. This is a budget that breaks everything down by organization. So in MCPS, education K through 12, it's a separate organization from special ed, it's a separate organization from all of the overhead activities and staff functions. There's a program budget, which is published as well, and it crosswalks the $2.4 billion that's in the operating budget. This is the operating budget. To all of the individual major programs. Now, in the case of education, the first area of the program budget deals with macro strategies and strategic proxies for how we want to improve educational achievement of our kids. And I commend it to you. Very few people look at it. I suspect folks in MCPS use it a great deal. It looks like it would be an excellent management tool. But instead of looking at the budget in terms of objects of expenditure, salaries, contracts, supplies, etc., it looks at it in terms of programs. So it takes this $1 billion and it breaks it down into program strategies that are being used in many ways for interventions to improve educational achievement. But my first finding is that only 16% of the budget in this organization budget could be traced as strategies. In the program budget, it's as high as 25%. But I want to point out that that's still a lot less than 100%. We don't know what the objective would be, but it would certainly be better to do more strategic alignment of the additional increment that we ask for each year. In this case, in Table 1A of the budget presentation, there's an identification of all the ways that the new money is being spent. That's money above and beyond what last year's money was. And a little less than $100 million of that, a little less than $10 million of that is actually assigned to strategic priority enhancements. Are being used in many ways for interventions to improve educational achievement. But my first finding is that only 16% of the budget in this organization budget could be traced to strategies. In the program budget, it's as high as 25%. But I want to point out that that's still a lot less than 100%. We don't know what the objective would be, but it would certainly be better to do more strategic alignment of the additional increment that we ask for each year. In this case, in Table 1A of the budget presentation, there's an identification of all the ways that the new money is being spent. That's money above and beyond what last year's money was. And a little less than 100 million of that, a little less than 10 million of that is actually assigned to strategic priority enhancements, or 8% of total increase. Most of the increase in this budget is going to salaries and benefits. Any surprise? Based on what you heard from Joan, that's going to be a story throughout every chapter you're going to look at. So that literally, salaries and benefits are eating instructional life. Because of allocation of resources to salary and benefit increases, we have less and less money to spend on interventions and academic achievement improvements. Productivity, number 2. Well, I guess this is kind of redundant to what I just said. There's no data in the budget to justify any of the salary increases. No data to justify spending that we're doing in focus schools. These are the schools largely in what we used to call the red zone, where we spend on average $1.9 million per year more than we do in wealthier schools. There's no data to justify that either. What the right number is, we don't know. Third observation, goals. The goals are cited in the budget to be reducing the achievement gap and 21st century education, but no targets are set for either. Fourth, in salaries, our salaries are high. We've known this for years, and this is an old number. Every year we raise our number, and our competition in Howard, Fairfax County raise their numbers, and we've maintained the gap well. We're still 20% higher, although our dropout rates are much higher than Fairfax and Howard County. What are we getting for this extra money? Well, we have well-compensated teachers, that's for sure. Because of that, we rely increasingly on para-educators. These are folks that aren't certified teachers. They're very, very good instructors in many cases. That's how they got hired. And these are the folks that we put into the struggling schools to close the achievement gap. Para-educators. Yes, sir?
Can you say how much our teachers are leaving despite that much salary?
No, dropouts. I'm talking about kids. Kids and students that drop out. Right. I'm glad you asked that. And lately, we've made excellent improvement in reducing the suspension rate in schools, but the dropout rate is still a real nagging problem for us. So in addition to relying on para-educators, and it was plus 59 that we're looking for in the new budget, we are also looking at a 2% pay raise plus staff and longevity increases. They're going to cost in the order of $52 million for teachers. Observation number 5, this budget has overhead for administrators, counselors, and media specialists in the schools. And that is about 18.8% of the budget. And it's down a little bit. That's the good news. Gap closing spending, item number 6. No information on last year's innovation schools, although it's probably too soon to see what the innovation school, and there's another category of schools that were identified in June of 2013 for new ways to address the achievement gap. It's probably too soon to see the results there. A lot of that was implemented throughout the previous school year and is still in the process of being implemented. But none of the program budget elements, certainly this organization budget, is silent on that. We are adding, and this is something new this year, this is an emerging trend. The growth and the challenge seems to be more focused on middle schools and high schools. It used to be the elementary schools where we focused for years, beginning in the early 2000s. And for years and years, that's where the extra resources were going. Now it's trending towards middle schools and high schools. And we're adding 42 teachers there. plus a number of others, and these would be psychologists, counselors, to close the gap. Item 7, enrollment increases are largely in the middle schools and high schools, and that accounts for the increases in teachers in those areas. And the budget allows for more teachers there. Number 8, ACES. This is the special program for kids that are first generation for college. Has been expanded to 5 more high schools from just 10 last year, and that's a good thing. I think that's a step in the right direction for a lot of kids.
And that's 2.5 by 5. So it's gone from 10 to 15 or?
Say it again?
Well, you said it expanded to 5 high schools from just 10. So
Yes, so it's 15 total.
So it's, okay, expanded by 5.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the organization numbers, a couple of things pop out in terms of where the employees are. And you'll see that I've broken down elementary, middle, and high school, the employees into 2 categories. The nominals, those are folks that aren't strategic, and we couldn't trace the strategies, and those that are. And you'll see that one interesting thing here is that the ratio of strategic employees to non-strategic is smaller in middle and high schools. So that's where we've got work to do. Our strategies for a decade and a half have been focused on middle school, on elementary schools. We've moved, in the case of algebra, to beef up our middle school programs. We've got a heck of a lot of work to do in high schools, and that's where the dropouts are happening. Something else that will jump out at you, we talked about the para-eds in the schools. You'll see that there's a lot of them in the elementary school. Increasingly, you're going to see more para-eds pulling the load in terms of closing the achievement gap at the high school level.
Dorothy?
Yeah.
Excuse me, just a quick clarification.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for my ignorance.
Sure.
Paraeducators, those are paid professional
Yes.
employees. They're not teachers, but they're in the same
They're not certified.
category. Okay.
If
They're
I
not
got that right?
parents. Yeah, they're not like parents who
No,
volunteer one day a
no,
week.
we got those. That's a different program.
Okay, but that's not this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay, now to the classic object and expenditure budget stuff. It's about $1 billion in total budget, which and we're asking for a $41 million increase. A lot of that salaries, and it's almost all of the increase, in fact. This was a little hard to do. I was trying to get an average teacher salary, but the budget doesn't break teachers out of a category called professional, but it's a good proxy. Our teachers are making somewhere like that number. Now, you're going to hear a lot of different numbers about what the teachers make. Sometimes when the union talks about it, they talk about the published labor step categories. But this $85,000 to $86,000 a year is what they're making on average.
Well,
Yes.
does that 85,000 include benefits and, you know?
No. No, that's just salary. Yes, sir.
And it does include the paraeducators, so presumably we're pulling it down.
Yes.
So the real teachers are.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. And it's a seniority-based system, so teachers with more experience get paid. The administrators do make money, and there are quite a few of them. And there are quite a few people in the support services category. They make the least amount of money, but that's supply and demand. Contracts. Some observations here. In this category, it's only $3 million, which is small beer when you're looking at $1 billion. But it's 20% more than last year, and there's no justification for why we're carrying forward the increase from last year. In supplies, it's even more egregious. Last year, we had a big bump in this number for tablets. Does everybody remember that? For Common Core, we were going to put tablets in everybody's hands. Now, that's baked into the numbers now, so we have a recurring cost here. No justification for $24.6 million, but that's what it looks like. It's an incremental budget, just baked in last year's big increase for tablets, and do it again, I guess. So, in terms of issues, and I know I'm taking a little more time than I'd like to, but if you see something that's interesting, we should talk about it. teacher performance, the first issue. The red zone, this is Jerry Weiss's expression. It's now called focus schools. I don't know what the next superintendent's going to call it, but I guarantee it'll be something different, hopefully exciting. Elementary school teachers in our core schools are paid less and have lower math and reading scores, no surprise. Last year, we added this program called the Career Latest program, which was designed to incentivize our better teachers to stay in the red zone. Yeah, Jim?
Can I ask you a question about this, when it's for our elementary schools and our red zone?
Yeah.
Is that because their benefits for teaching is low, so their
Yes.
salaries are lower?
Yes.
So the less experienced teachers in the red zone?
Exactly.
And then when they get more time, they lose their raise.
That's what happens.
Right.
And so as a consequence, red zone teachers are paid less. It's not because we have maliciously designed a policy that disincentivize people from teaching in the red zone. However, that's exactly what's happened. Because of the seniority pay system and a practice called free agency, which does not restrict teachers, but fully encourages teachers to move from the red zone to the green zone, where they have shorter days and fewer classroom instructors. They get fewer classroom interruptions. I told you English wasn't nice. All right. We didn't get any feedback in this budget on that program, but it is new. And it's probably implemented throughout the last year. We hope to see something in next year's budget, maybe even a mid-year update on that, because that program has great potential. Its budget has it's $775K from last year, same as this year. The achievement gap. The consortium study came out since we last got together and talked about the budget. It came out in April, I think, last year. And it showed that the achievement gap has expanded in a number of ways. There are several performance measures. Some showed that the gap had widened. Some showed that the gap had contracted or stayed the same. But in general, there were more performance measures showing the gap had expanded. This is a report done by the Independent Office of Legislative Oversight within the County Council. Generally speaking, we have new strategies in place to deal with the achievement gap that have yet to show fruit, but they look promising. These strategies have basically taken the centralized model and busted it up. We used to do everything with the achievement gap through centralized programs and oversight. Now we've delegated my responsibility to principals, because that's what we're paying them to do. And we're asking principals to decide where to spend the money and what to spend it on to improve their performance, because we want to hold them accountable for results, and we don't want to tie their hands with central decisions. But as you'll see when I talk about the central office budget, we have yet to change the centralized hierarchy that used to manage this performance. That's an opportunity for not only savings, but also for changing the way we manage closing the achievement gap. The superintendent's pointed out we're spending more on average in our core schools, so we don't know if that's the right number, but this is a shock. Very deep on page 29 of the OLO consortium report is the fact that only 8% of the kids in our core schools that take the ACT or SAT exam are college ready.
What do you have numbers?
Page 29 of the OLO Achievement Consortium report. And that's a consortium or consortium-like schools. So the old red zone schools, only 8% of the kids that are farms. I'm not saying the full thing, but let me say it correctly. These are poor kids, free and reduced meals, in consortium-like schools. Only 8% were college ready. They got a 20 or better on the ACT exam. They got a 1650, I think it is, or better on the SAT exam. That's a terrible number, and I'll tell you why it's terrible. Because it was 7% in 2009, and we've been patting ourselves on the back for doing great things. In fact, a lot of those kids went through all of those elementary school programs that we had in the 2000s. Something's happening at the high school level. When wheels come off the bus, the kids go in different directions.
Snow days.
Well, it could be, but it's something we're just learning to grapple with. As the kids go in different directions.
Snow days.
Well, it could be, But it's something we're just learning to grapple with. And as we work through the achievement gap at the high school level, I promise you there'll be changes. Yes, sir?
Well, I noticed that the OLO report basically said that where we've had some improvements in some areas, the improvements in the non-consortium schools, the rich schools, were a little bit more
Yes.
than the improvement in the consortium schools.
And that's true for all races and incomes, et cetera.
So that means that the $2,000 per student and the central oversight and all the programs and everything has had zero net impact. So my question is,
We don't know.
a big part?
We don't know, because you don't know what it would have, maybe it would have been even worse if we hadn't spent that extra money.
Well, I'm saying that there's been improvement in the schools where we didn't do anything was more than the improvement where we did all these things.
Right.
So that means that a lot of these things must have been counterproductive.
Probably. But it probably means a lot of other things. What we do know is that poverty, which exists in a lot of the schools that we're talking about, it manifests itself in terms of academic achievement in many, many different ways. And we're just coming to grips with it. If I get a chance to talk about the program budget, I'll show you the meals, I'll show you the summer school, I'll show you all the extra things, the health programs, all the extra things we're doing for kids. We still don't know if that's making a difference, but we don't want to stop it because we don't know that it's dysfunctional. But I take your point. Your point's well taken. The OLO report clearly shows that African American and Latino kids do better. Even the poor ones do better in the green zone schools.
No, they don't. They've improved. They're still doing really crappy in the rich schools. They're still doing
compared to their peers in the rich schools.
That's right.
But they're doing better than their peers in the poor schools.
Only a little bit better. And the improvement over the last 4 years in the rich schools has been a little bit. The improvement in the poor schools, where all the extra resources were put in, has been less than the improvement in the schools that got no attention, or no extra attention. And so my question is how do we learn, is there anything in the budget that indicates that we're going to learn which of these programs work or which don't work? Are we just going to deploy some more programs because they sound like they might work?
That's a good. Jillian, comment?
Well, this is my question. If you recall, back from our many debates, was how are we mapping out where our programs are, where we're getting most bang for buck? That's what I just kept saying. What programs are working, what's not working? And I asked that question since I've been there many times. And we apparently are doing that analysis now. I can't remember the name of it. Are you talking about this? This rocket that's doing that, program and our success rates. So that you know, you're aware that this is happening. Yeah, so this is happening now. So as this comes into, it's very complicated because we're trying to put numbers on kids and show success rates and all that kind of, which is a very difficult process. But this could tell us something to answer that question. That's what I'm really looking forward to that data when this comes out. I don't know why, I don't think anything like that came out before. So this could be a new great thing, which I'm really excited about.
And the best news I have, and I just keep coming back to this, we have decentralized our approach to management. We are putting more authority and responsibility in the hands of principals than ever before. And this is across the board in the red zone. And they're each learning labs. They're each trying different things that make sense for their schools. And I've seen this. I've been out in the red zone talking to principals who are working with this. They all want more authority and more latitude in how to spend the money. You can never give them enough. But I think that the spirit is alive. One of the problems, and I'll show you this in a bit, is we have a harder time getting our hands on the data because all this stuff is so decentralized now. All the old data collection programs are obsolete in many ways. So the principals have a lot of authority to respond to the problem that's local.
Yeah, but I did ask specifically in our budget work session. I don't know if any of you watched it. I said we know if it's smaller class sizes or focus teachers or programs or any myriad ways for to achieve what's having the greatest impact. And they did have some response about this thing. And I don't know if you could find any, like, find it on the answers, what it's called, but I don't know, or the
Okay. So they're aware of the problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
So often we go, we have this program and we don't know how it's doing or what its impact is. And I always go back to Walmart, where the founder of Walmart got in his car, an old car, and went to every one of his stores at least once every 2 years. He was hidden. I mean, no one knew he was there. He would just go in and see what was going on. And I'm just thinking about, for example, the school I taught at here in Rockville, and it was a lot of farms. So let's give up the whole ship and just feed everybody in the morning for first period. And if you had interviewed me, first of all, no one ever came to my classroom during the time these kids were eating during my homeroom and making a complete wreck of just getting very disorganized because of all the things. But if they had interviewed me, even if they didn't want to, I would have said the following. Half of what they're given is thrown out. 2/3 of the kids I'm talking to are overweight, not underweight, and they're not hungry when they come in. That class is my most difficult class to keep up with my other classes because I lose 5 minutes because of all the complications of them putting the food in the bag and it's falling out and we have to throw it out and I'm getting everybody back under control. And that's what would have been my opinion. I would have said every time we feed these kids in my classroom, it's a net negative for them closing the achievement. And so I'm not saying every teacher would say that, but I am saying no one visited the class and see what goes on, how much milk is being
Well,
thrown out.
I appreciate the anecdote. The school system does take the gap seriously. And some are now being given a hand to try things. Yes, ma'am?
When you talk about individual principals,
Yes.
just 2 items that have come up in the last few weeks. I'll start with Paint Brand. Paint Brand's had a principal that retired. It's a new principal. The new principal is now imposing fees, including a graduation senior fee that the previous principal didn't have. The previous principal has written about this. She thinks it's horrible. Yet with this latitude, the new principal is able to now charge students to attend their own graduation. The Churchill newspaper, the students just wrote an article and an editorial about the principal's practice there, where if you don't, well, I don't know how to put it. You have a final exam in a class. If your parents write a note, you can get exempted from that exam. Not that you take it later, not that you do a makeup, they completely exempt it. So if your grades are going, you have a BA, you don't want to risk the exam, you get a letter from your parents, you're exempt. And you skip the exam. No harm, no foul. So, giving the principal, okay, but you know what? We need oversight. We still need oversight.
I agree. Standards.
Yeah, we need standards and we need oversight. And there has to be somebody in charge.
I'm just wrapping.
No, don't wrap, keep going.
So, observation number 3, the last observation, performance. The key high school performance measures are totally irrelevant to this 8% that we talked about. These are the poor kids that aren't college ready when they graduate. The AP, SAT, Algebra 2 measures that are so popular in MCPS are irrelevant to them because they don't take those tests. We have expanded performance measures, although 2 that I particularly like, ACT, which is the test that all of these poor kids have been counseled to take, not the SAT. The ACT exams are what they take. And eligibility. Neither of these measures are shown in school at a glance, or are they easy to find in any of the published data. They're buried deep in an appendix that's given to the board in September. Good luck finding them. You'll find they're not pretty numbers. Can I take one extra second to talk about the program budget? The second page of your handout is the program budget. I'd like to just briefly talk about this because we never look at it and it has some interesting data. It's, this budget, I've only shown the first of 6 categories of programs. There are 6 categories of programs. And this is the first of the 6. It's the one that has the most amount of what you would call intervention stuff for improving academic achievement. And you'll see, let me just take you through the high points first before we jump into the bottom details. It's about a quarter of the overall budget, $637 million at the bottom of the first column is the total of all these programs. These programs are aggregations of things, so that to call them strategies is probably inappropriate, but they are. This is the kind of framework you would need in order to manage strategies, in order to budget strategies, in order to talk about them in a forum like this. This is the kind of structure that I, as an accountant and former budget officer in the state of Illinois, would love to use to talk about how we determine where our programs are most cost effective, where we should allocate resources. The first program, no surprise, an old friend of ours, Pre-K and Head Start. It gets $18 million. There are 2,788 kids. The average cost per kid, and this is just a real simple-minded formula. I'm not looking at anything more than the most common denominator, number of students involved in the program, is $6,438. And if you look quickly down that column, the third column, you'll see in terms of average cost per student where we have data, it's one of our more cost-effective programs. Does it produce results? Well, no data is provided. In fact, if you look at the fourth column, all the way down, you're going to see no data is provided in the program budget for people that want to know answers to what's cost effective about, is this improving the academic achievement of kids? We actually have the data. We have wonderful longitudinal data on kids, not only through their K through 12 experience, but we have it beyond, into their college and beyond years. But we have, I don't think we've asked the school system to produce that data for the public, and I worry whether or not that data is available internally for management or useful and available to our oversight body, the board. But if I had an answer to that productivity question, I could tell you that there are 2 questions that you ask when you look at programs. Are they efficient and are they effective? The third column tells you, is it efficient? Average cost per student. The fourth column answers an equally important, if not more important question, that is it effective? And ideally you have efficient and effective programs. We don't know for anything except for Maryland Meals, which is right down here. They were the only program for which data was provided on performance, and they were courageous enough to tell us that feeding kids improves attendance by 2 days per week. And that's something to work with in terms of effectiveness. Something else I'd like to point out in these numbers, the top third or so are general education programs. And you'll see a lot of that is where this extra money is being spent in our red zone schools for elementary school instruction support, middle school, high school instruction support. A lot of resources going in to the poorer schools in the system. But a lot of the data that you need to evaluate that's missing, in part because I think a lot of the management now is being done locally, and we aren't collecting data on how many students are being served by these interventions, and certainly aren't providing data on their academic achievement. But as you go through the bottom 2/3 of this, you run into special ed. And it shouldn't surprise you that out of that $637 million that's on this page, most of it's special ed, about $400 million. The student populations are a lot smaller though. So what you find is that the average cost in that third column for these special ed programs is much larger. And there's an outlier right here in physical disabilities. And this is an example of statistical stupidity. And I'll take responsibility for that. When you have a bad denominator, 37 students, which is the published number in the program budget, you get a ridiculous number of average cost per student of $330,000. Now you ask yourself, well, that's got to be wrong. I hope it's wrong, I really do, but this is the published number. I think that the school system, when it puts together the program budget, is a little less rigorous in its evaluation of what goes into the program narratives. But nonetheless, use a reasonableness test. How much should we spend per student on an intervention to improve their academic achievement? What's it worth? And I don't think priceless is the answer. And I think that's a crazy number. But these other numbers are pretty high. When you look at speech and language, $145,000 per kid per year. I want to bring this to your attention because I know that it's difficult to talk about the cost of special education. And as an accountant, I am often challenged to find a way to talk about efficiency and effectiveness. One of the things I looked at, and this is, again is efficiency, is how much of these costs are driven by payroll. And I'll give you another benchmark. There's only one program on this list that is non-MCPS employees. And it is appropriately labeled non-public disabilities. This is where we outsource. This is where we go outside, probably because of lawsuits and compliance, with some kids to private programs that help them. It's a lot cheaper in some instances than other programs that are in-house. So I would say the big challenge for MCPS is to find a way to balance in-sourcing with outsourcing on a lot of these special programs that work with small subpopulations of students to improve their cost efficiency.
Or outsource the whole program?
That's a challenge, but yes, that won't happen overnight, but I see no reason not to go that way. Yes, Ed?
Elementary school instruction support, middle school
Right,
instruction
yeah,
support.
those are the three levels, obviously, but that is all the interventions that we do.
No, the teachers.
Yeah,
And if I'm teaching in a middle school, am I in here yet?
yes.
All I do is teach my class. I have 5 classes a day. Where am I? My
So,
salary.
so there's another program category
Separate.
that
Not
has
okay.
the general education.
I got it.
Okay, so this is interventions. That's above and beyond the standard core education. Yes, ma'am?
I'm not sure if this is appropriate in the program here. Is it question and answer time?
Sort of, sure.
Sort of.
Got it.
Okay, I have two,
Yeah,
just two.
I always run over, so
Go
I look
ahead.
at Paul here.
I have two general questions. You can, present a lot of numbers and a lot of information, which is overload for a lot of people who would
Right.
be able to take it in. And you can dissect a budget in lots of different ways.
Right.
But just overall, I think about what does Montgomery County spend per student versus other counties. And I mean, we always hear this, Montgomery County spends X number per student and other counties spend. In other words, what does the school system, how do they justify that number? What are the reasons given to the public of
I
why
agree with
it's
that.
so
In fact,
expensive?
That was one of the first observations, that we just don't get benchmark
You don't
data
get no
out of this
answer?
county. If you go to the Fairfax County school system budget, you will see benchmarking data where they compare their numbers to other counties and other peers. We don't do that. And
Well, that's
it's a
wrong.
number that I would love to see as well.
Well, I mean, I think this league is probably, should put some pressure on that. There should be answers as to why. And
Right.
it's no different than why is our gas tax floor in this state than in
Yeah.
Virginia, where we all have roads and we all
Well,
maintain.
and I would say for the last 3 years, we have been advocating for an independent review of the MCPS costs and plans for closing the achievement gaps. Now,
So-
we made that recommendation last superintendent, he didn't want to. We have an opportunity with the new superintendent to get a fresh look at that, and I personally guarantee you, we will be pushing hard for that. It hasn't been done,
It takes a long time.
it hasn't been done for 40 years.
But second,
Can you believe that? We haven't had an
I believe
independent
it.
review of
that's why it keeps
MCPS's
going
numbers.
up, and there's no control.
MCPS's cost for 40 years.
The second question is, you mentioned salaries and benefits. I
Yes.
was a budget analyst in the government, and I know that the biggest cost is salaries and benefits.
Right.
Now, in a school system, if you want to save money, I don't know how you deal with that big portion. You obviously can't fire your good teachers.
No, what you do is you want to assign them things that are strategic to do, and you want to manage them to create strategic outcomes.
No,
That's the challenge.
but I mean, you can't really reduce their salaries and benefits.
No, but you want to make it productive. That's what you want to do.
Okay, so you're saying we're paying a lot of money, we're not getting the productivity out of
It's
it.
about 89%, I think, of our.
Well, that's wrong too.
90%,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't understand that mentality either.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's
So they're
about
just two
productivity.
general things that the public would look
Right.
at without dissecting
And I
them.
can tell you, the last superintendent looked at me and said, "You don't understand how schools work. We don't talk in terms of productivity."
Outcome. Statistics. Thank you very much.
Now, if you have 2 more pages, and I'll come back to you when I get to chapter 8.
Recording will be around.
Keep the pressure on board and keep getting those answers.
I'll catch up because I am going to do the next 2 chapters, and I have to admit I didn't really get a chance to look at them. So, I also wanted to introduce Brigida because you're running for
City
City
Council.
Council in the city of Rockville. So, thanks
Okay.
for coming.
I'll bring you them all. And I want to know if I need to pay my dues. When are they due? I mean,
They're due today.
Oh, okay, cool.
Every day you ask,
I don't know.
and you've forgotten when you last paid your bill.
So, I'll run through the next sections really quickly then, because as I say, I apologize, but I didn't really get a chance to go through. So, the next chapter is the Office of School Support and Improvement. And I'll just say that the annual budget that they have is actually $10,730, but then for salaries and so forth, and they want to increase by one administrator and 2 professional staff. And they also have, interestingly, $103 for contracts. So it sounds like a lot of the work that's being done there is actually contracted out. So I'll just leave it at that. And you can look in the budget if you have more questions. I apologize. So the chapter 3 is the Office of Chief Academic Officer. And again, I'm just going to go through really quickly. The overall budget that they're budgeting for FY 2016 is about $1 million. And they have an increase of about $250,000 here. And in this case, I always look at travel because I think it's kind of indicative. Here they're asking for about $8,000 in travel expenses. So that was kind of interesting, given the staff seems to be like about 6 people. The other thing is, it's a very short chapter, and when I looked into it, they have a strategic priorities enhancement of $250,000. And this is a new program called the Children's Trust that they want to spend the money on. And after many of us went through the ITA battle, now I see actually that the Children's Trust is going to be led by a governing board made up of the county executive, county council president, president of the Board of Ed, the superintendent, and a business leader. The governing board will set policy and funding priorities. So this is just starting out some brand new program, the Children's Trust, already $250,000 allocated to it, and it's very likely that the public probably doesn't know this exists or will exist. And it's being set up, and they'll have their meetings, which should be public meetings subject to the Maryland Open Meetings Act, likely will be in private rooms. There won't be a website. I really doubt if there's going to be, any announcement of these meetings. So I just wanted to keep you apprised of that, and that's pretty much what I've got for chapter 2. Yes.
Quick question, can we challenge that?
Well, sure, we could challenge that. Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth at least saying this Children's Trust, these meetings, and the board makeup is subject to the Open Meetings Act.
The board has a history of violating it.
Yes, they do. Yeah, Janice?
It probably isn't subject to the Open Meetings Act,
Oh,
would
really?
be my guess. But in the interest of transparency, because they're spending public money, obviously you would want them to be operating in the open. But that other group that they set up a while back, it was Nancy Navarro, Valerie Urban, Jerry Wiest, and they met like in the lobby at the council building. I cannot remember what it was called. Went out of my head. But that's what I mean. They skirted the Open Meeting Act by creating a group that didn't fall under the actual act. So it's possible they can get away with that, but the problem is they're spending public money. And so do we want them to do that? you know, that's the public policy issue.
Right, and this hasn't really been announced on the board's website or in the newspapers.
Right, I did ask specifically about that. Did anybody watch our work session? You really need to watch our work session, that's the first thing. Or come to the work session, the budget work session, it'd be great to have you there. See what we asked, question. I asked a ton of questions, other people did too. You can see that there's 66 questions, I think, that we asked staff about, you know. And so it's on our website, so you can see the answers to the questions. And I'm trying to feverishly look through to see if I can find these things. But this was something specifically I asked about. What's the strategic plan for this group?
Right.
What are the goals for this money? How are we going to measure if it's successful? But the answer, I think, was that this was money that they agreed to put aside with, in addition to county council, county money, to create a fund that would be used for things in the future. But that was as specific as I was able to get.
What things would that be?
Things, Paula.
What, do you remember what the things were?
I believe children at risk. and-
Children at risk
Yes.
efforts, right. So it's like, it'll be a fund that we use for programs in the future, but
It was first brought up last spring, I believe, in the county executive's budget, if you go back and look at that. And so Mr. Leventhal, as chair of, I believe, the HHS committee at the time, had the head of HHS in a hearing and talked about that children's trust. So it's been talked about several months ago, and I know that was archived. So if you wanted to go back and look what they were saying back then, this is the MCPS share of that trust of multi-agencies working together.
I mean, this is in addition to the 2.4 billion.
No,
This
it's
is part of
within,
it. No,
it's
this
part
is
of
all
the
part of it.
MCPS
This
request.
is in this chapter 3, Office of the Chief Academic Officer.
So I was just gonna say, so they did that they're doing it with this group, they did it with the group that I can't remember the name of, and they, Star went and did it with Montgomery College and committed, I can't remember how much money, without board approval. So we keep having these pots of money that we shoot out to these partnerships, again, with no performance measure. You know, where we don't account for the money, we don't know how it's spent.
Yeah, it's like how does we come up with this
Right,
number?
right.
You know, why is it 225 as opposed to, 150 or 300?
Right, what are you trying to fund?
Right. Yeah, it just seems, and we see this in other parts of the government, this county government, where a lot of things, they don't like, a public eye on it, so they sort of create these almost semi-private boards or organizations where there really is no public oversight or knowledge about these programs. I mean, $250,000, that is a lot of money for taxpayers, and I understand what you're saying, and I know Mr. Leventhal is very committed to, health and human services issues, but it seems somewhat duplicative too, to have $250,000 dedicated to something
Well,
that's.
if I could just suggest something, there's
Yeah.
a much bigger elephant in the room when you talk about linkages to learning, which this is
Right.
part of.
Right.
This is the total wraparound, social services, pay your utility bill if you fall behind on your rent, help out, feed you, give you free health care, that has been in the Kennedy cluster since 2009. We are now expanding it to the Watkins Mill cluster. And it's Ike's budget, it's the county executive who's been paying for this for nigh on 8 years. And we're talking tens of millions of dollars. We have yet to see a study to determine if it's made any impact on the achievement gap. And now we're, as a token exercise, adding from the MCPS side, $250,000, small beer, to the game. And this was just a gesture to get in the game.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so that's it, and then, Ed? Chapter 4. Is this right? Right, thank you. So, Ed, Ahmed.
How are you guys?
Thanks very much.
First, Jill, thank you for coming. All the board
I can't
needs
say-
to be here
well-
when people are talking about budgets that are going on in the MCPS. And I
I'll
think we're
share.
starting to see some trends of what we're talking about as we go through the chapters, and so the same thing will probably happen here. And in fact, Gordon, This is the Office of Curriculum and Programs, and the more I heard you, the more I got more and more confused on where this office ended the activities and yours begins, and vice versa. But I do have my own budget, and it's interesting, and so. The Office of Curriculum and Programs, obviously that's where general education is occurring in the classroom, most of the budget is. The Office of Curriculum and Programs is charged with instructional programs, developing and improving them in-house at the Common Core, implementing the rollout, the training of the teachers, and monitoring the assessments and the training evaluations. It makes it the key department for making classrooms more effective and for closing the achievement gap, however we want to define it. Rich, poor, black, white, us versus Singapore, however we want to define it. That's their job. They have a lot of things going on. I'm just going to mention a few and go on. But they have online learning programs, Pathway to Graduation, 1,420 kids, geared towards credit recovery so they can graduate online. Career and post-secondary partnerships, career pathways, programs in 5 high schools, business, nonprofits, government partnerships, including 26 DOE programs that earn industry and college credits. They have career in tech ed under a Perkins grant and growing collaboration with Montgomery Community College. They have a foundations program which collaborates with automotive, construction, and IT industries. 1,000 students took advantage of that. They have a division of accelerated learning and enriched programs, which includes a lot of remediation, tutoring stuff, such as the middle school extended day and year program, the regional summer school program for high schools that had 5,520 kids, and it came in as a program in yours, and I was saying, oh my God, I have a budget too. We have to probably add them together, but besides, an avid mentor program, Lights, Camera, Literacy Plus, a bridge program. They, of course, are involved not only with radiation, but the other side, so that the gifted and talented, the IB programs, the consortium programs, and finally, Title I, ESOL, and Head Start. So it's on mine and in yours. Again, I don't understand how your budget meshes with my budget. So there's a lot to analyze here, and we would sit here for 40 hours, so I'm just going to focus on the big picture. And some of the things I'm going to say, I think, have been brought up already. I want to say I took this section before because, one, it's an integral part of the whole MCPS system and how it's going to be successful. Number two, as a teacher, I was exposed to, I participated in, I was affected by, and I brought up one with the breakfasts in the classroom. I was affected by the changes in curriculum 3 times in a short period of time. Data collection, assessments, No Child Left Behind, etc., professional development programs. My experience was considerably mixed. And I'm sure when you interview teachers from different programs, you'd say, sometimes, that's good, why are we doing this if no one thinks it's worth it? Let me start with the budget. It's $106 million, we're going to call it, for 14, going to $113 million in 16. That's a 6.3% increase. 89% of the budget is salaries. We have a slight increase in administration over these next 2 years, a slight increase in professionals, and a slight decrease in support staff in this area. It's been a very busy office the last 10 or 15 years. Tremendous expansion in AP course offerings, participation, magnet school programs, and the consortiums, the career program, all these things, data analysis. It's just been the biggest growth in activity probably over the last 15 years. I'm guessing anyone would agree. The result, some efforts should probably receive high grades, others should probably receive low grades. Some I have a personal great affinity towards. I just love these automotive, construction, AT industry partnerships. And so even though I couldn't wait to get to them and say, let's see how they're doing, we have almost no idea how any of these programs are doing. And even if they're doing well, we don't know. So I'm going to talk about them, 3 programs. And it's going to be something you've already heard, but I'm going to get more detailed and hopefully it'll be worth it. 3 problems.
There are a myriad of programs under this office. The costs and benefits of the programs are not separately tracked. The budget aggregates the costs, such as salary, and puts them into single line items within the department, so we have no idea of the cost of the program, some a little better than others. Number two, it's actually much worse than this. Many of these programs are actually largely executed by staff at the individual schools throughout the county. In many cases, these costs are not accounted for at all. In others, they're very inadequately accounted for. So for example, 3 staff members from this office might spend 300 man days training administrators and teachers in Common Core, or differentiated learning, or pedagogy, or for the IB program. But the school's teachers and administrators prepare for the training, attend the training, and are responsible for executing the program. They even utilize the school's facility. None of these are accounted for. This artificially reduces the reported costs of these programs, and for that matter, everything in Chapter 4, and artificially increases the cost allocated to operating the individual schools. In other words, traditional education gets overcharged, and these innovative special programs get undercharged. This also means that the office cannot accurately answer the question, how much does this program cost each year for many of their programs? And as I said, some of these programs sound great. I'm for after-school tutoring. I favor them. And then I write the words, I think, because I don't really have the benefits of cost. Another consequence of this is that when we try to analyze budgets, we can only benchmark aggregates. What's our salary cost compared to Fairfax? And we can, without taking into account the different programs, and it's not very helpful. The solution, line workers' time, teachers and administrators, which are the largest portions, need to be allocated to these programs on their sheets. For those concerned about teachers filling out complex time sheets, it's pretty easy. When the teachers are in a Common Core session, the session leader can just tell them to track these hours and put 2 on your time sheet today. I hope you brought your time sheets here to the meeting. And they get into the habit of bringing their time sheets and other things. It can be done. Any industry where 89% of your costs are labor, you need to track what the labor is doing every day. Finally, we're talking numbers and dollars and numbers. I want to go beyond the interests of the taxpayers. Sorry, the Taxpayers Association. I want to talk the impact on instruction and learning in our schools. Let's say professional development programs, Common Core, and other things. All these things we've been talking about account for 20% of a typical teacher's or administrator's time. This means they are spending 80% of their time running their classrooms and their schools. It means less time for lesson planning, grading, evaluating teachers. It means higher risk of burnout for teachers. The biggest burden I had in large class was grading. If I had more time to grade, I could have a larger class, which would reduce costs. I could also give better feedback and fewer multiple choice exams if I had a little more time. But I have less time for all this if I'm in meetings dealing with new curriculum rollouts or other things. And I nitpicked with the food thing in the morning. It wasn't nitpicky to me. I had a class underperforming my other 4 classes because I was trying to figure out how to get the food out of their mouths and get my class started in the morning. I had to figure out what to do with the overflowing garbages of all the milks and what to do with the milks that were not finished and things like that. Problem number 3, I said there were 3 problems. Benefits and outcomes. And again, it was brought up, so I'm going to be a little more specific. I focus on the costs. Reading 69 pages of this budget, this chapter 4, I saw very few numbers regarding outcomes, and mostly they track number of participants, such as 5,522 students participated in a regional summer school. Okay? Didn't cite any performance measures. What percent passed at the end? What percent were even required to take the same final exam in May or June? It should have at least said at 5,520, every one of them had Fs coming into summer school. Of those, 3,130 of them passed the exam they had failed in May. That would have been nice to know. What if none of them showed up? Of the 5,520 kids, only 80% of them showed up for 50% of the classes. That would have been interesting. I'm going to take a few examples. The executive office has no performance measure for itself. This is the executive office. Its primary job is to measure the progress and the cost benefits of all the activities under its office. For example, the number of students at risk not graduating who completed foundations program. That would be interesting. From the Department of...
Not just graduating, but college and career ready.
What?
Not just graduating, but college and career ready.
And then you have to just tell us what is college ready. That's a funny little nebulous thing out there.
We say that, we've got more kids graduating from college, graduating from high school. Our numbers are better for African American Hispanic graduating from high school, but 70% of them meet remedial algebra when they go to Montgomery College, that they have to pay for themselves. This is something that we're looking at right now. But I'm saying, we use that, they graduated,
Yes. It's funny you bring that up. Somebody once said, what do you think of how are Maryland's schools done? And I said, I have no idea. I know how they're doing in my classroom. But I did find out. I went to the University of Maryland and found out that they are every year increasing the number of remediation courses that they give to the high school kids that are coming from Maryland into their school. So I had to go to a university to find out that Maryland, not Montgomery County, because they come from everywhere, is doing worse. Yeah.
Is there a law that says the school has to graduate these kids if they're 70% not ready for Montgomery College or junior college? Why are they graduating? Just because you don't want dropouts or you want your numbers to go up? I don't understand.
Well, that's a whole philosophical thing. But when I see
So let me just point you, the OLO did another report. It's called Developmental Education, which is the additional education you need to pay for yourself when you go to college because you aren't where you need to be. And that just came out, I think, it was like a month ago, maybe. But you could look that up on the county council's website under OLO
Or
reports.
to find out why they're passing them when
Well,
they're not
they
supposed
talked about, they explored all those issues and hopefully,
Just what's the bottom line? What was the outcome?
well, there's like.
The outcome was that we had a lot of kids that weren't ready to graduate because they couldn't pass the standard state test.
And they still
So
have
we
to
developed a new program called Bridges, which allows them to do special projects in lieu of taking those standard state tests, and they graduate.
And that brings your numbers up and not
improves
down.
your numbers.
And everybody's worried about numbers and not educating kids.
You might say.
And that's not some are going to online courses, but yeah, there's a few different ways, and one of them is that, which is the least from my standpoint.
I have basically the same question again, but the Department of Education has a inventory of what works. And in order to get something into the inventory of what works, they have different standards: gold standard, silver standard, bronze standard of evidence that it works. All of these programs, how many of them are in the Department of Education What Works inventory, and how many are in the pipeline to go there, and how many of the new ones we're initiating have any hope of getting into the U.S. Department of Education What Works?
I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to get out of that because we're here for budgets. I taught in the most challenging school you could possibly imagine in the D.C. area. I visited hundreds of schools, hundreds of schools east of the Mississippi. Schools that were performing at a ridiculous level, some that were not. Talked to district, the equivalent of the Joshua Stars at various districts. Talked to teachers, talked to principals. The number one criteria for how well kids do in the classroom is the teacher. All of the programs, if you put them all together, don't impact as much as the quality of the teacher. And I remember when I was in business school, and I got a good grade that I should have gotten a horrible grade on. My group was doing how to make a baseball team make more money, and we came out with all these great programs, and the teacher just loved us. I forgot what our grade up, but let's say it might have been an A. One guy got up And I think he might have gotten the dean, who's the only one who knew what he was talking about. He goes, he poured all of his marketing money into buying the best pitchers and hitters. Because if you have the best team and they go to the playoffs every year, you make the most money. And so sometimes the fancier, the more, and the programs and the bear doesn't equal the fact that what's happening at a certain time when the teacher and the kids are in the room. What kind of classroom management is in the room, what kind of follow-up is going on so that the kids, one at a time, are raising themselves. Yes?
I mean, well, I am a high school student, and honestly, like, the teacher, a good teacher does help, but the students themselves also have to want to learn. Like, if I have a bad teacher, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna work harder at home rather than just be like, oh, my teacher sucks. Like, I'm not gonna do anything about it.
I don't know what school you're at, but I would wager 1991 you are not a typical student.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
Well, you're here, you're not
The students have to want to learn.
But
Like,
they
the
can be
teachers want to
motivated.
do so much.
They can be motivated by good teachers.
By the way, when I ran for board, remember I talked about the triangle. It's actually the teacher, student, parent triangle is where it all happens. So when you get into these disadvantaged areas, many of the kids have no clue what it even means to be engaged in school. And they don't get it until after the first 2 weeks, they get a phone call home, and the mom can't believe that the teacher's calling home because they're behind one homework. And that's setting the idea that you do homework. And you're sitting there going, I did my homework. But I went to schools where the amount of homework was being done was 10%. And I had to work very hard for my classroom to get up to 75%.
So I actually need to pick up my son from karate. I'm waiting for somebody to say that they're going to pick him up. They're not. But those are the kinds of things you can't measure, like communication between teachers and parents, because I know some teachers are really good about it. Some schools are much better about it than other schools. But I just wanted to bring you what we talked about before, question 53, and our questions that we asked of our staff is, how is the budget structured to address the issue of the achievement gap and provide information on accountability measures we have in place? And it basically is a long list of all the things that we're spending money on. And then the last paragraph is that the accountability measures are necessary to ensure that the achievement gap closing are part of a multi-dimensional accountability system that starts with the strategic planning frameworks, 5 milestones, and the annual targets established. At the school level, the school support and improvement framework serves as a primary tool, blah, 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 blah. They've begun on developing a standard approach for assessing the impact of resource allocations and what the return is on those investments. By comparing groupings of schools based on their level of budgetary support and aggregating student achievement around agreed upon metrics, we can identify where significant areas of improvement are occurring. This process will further inform whether resource allocation decisions align with the educational needs of students. So that's the thing I was talking about earlier, which apparently doesn't have anything. It's just that description. So anyway, but I have to go. But I encourage you, if you haven't seen the documents, they're all online. You've got our operating budget in brief and our personal compliment and all the stuff that they worked very hard on. And the next time we have a work session, I hope you'll watch. And also, if you have questions, and you have a lot of good questions, email me the questions, and then I can ask them during the work session, and you can see what the answers are. So, anyway. Thanks. Well, next budget. I don't know, do we have another work session before the next?
I mean, they could ask questions year round.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and shoot me
You can
questions.
ask questions online. So
Right.
where those 67 Q&As are that you mentioned, you can ask another question there.
So they do have a space for you to...
You still do that?
Well, I did it yesterday.
Oh, you
Yes,
did?
it's still there.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
But I didn't get an
Learned
answer.
All right. Thank you. Does anybody else have the
Jim.
reports that they can give me? Just so I can know. Oh, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to give me? No? Okay.
Jill, please, let me know what you think.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Can I ask a more general question? Ignorant of this whole process, I'm just learning. You say that they're not disclosing stuff in the budget, they're not disclosing this in the budget. Is this the only document that reports? Because in my experience, that's almost a budget is before the fact is what we plan to do. And I would expect to see, for example, commercial organisations, public companies are going to report 10K. that's when they actually say what they did. Is it that the school board doesn't, or the school doesn't actually do a report after the fact?
They don't track, they think in terms of departments. When
Right,
I
but
ran a
is
consulting
this the
firm-
only document that we get to see? Or is there some other report in which they might actually tell us how well
They
it
couldn't
is?
create a document that did this because they don't track what people are doing.
Right,
So they wouldn't
but
be
is
able
there-
to
is
do
You're
there-
talking about
They're
the
used-
annual report?
Yes.
They just put one
Oh,
at the
sorry.
last board meeting. They went over the new annual report for this year, and it is online and available to the public.
And does it have any information of these things that we're saying, we're criticising them because they're not in the budget? Are they in the annual report? Or is it?
I
that's
hope,
equal in-
there's a lot of information there. Hopefully, it will answer many questions. Can I guarantee it answers every one of your questions? I'm not sure that I can, because you have so many
Right,
good
are we aware that it
questions.
includes anything at all?
Pardon me?
Are we aware that it includes anything at all of these performance metrics?
I'm sorry, I mean, when I saw the annual report, it's more of a marketing thing, but the point about the budget that, and I'm sorry I came in late, I don't know if someone already touched on this, but in years past, like, I forget how many years ago, the budget was set by the Board of Education, so it was actually done in a public process that took many hours, and they went through the document that is then the final document. Under Jerry Weiss, that changed. The budget became a document that was put together behind closed doors. So we're missing a lot of discussion, a lot of the details, a lot of the balancing that goes on, the choices that are made. And over time, what's happened is, for example, teachers like librarians or media specialists, the budget would come out and they'd find that their positions were cut. Well, that trade-off had taken place behind closed doors, and they don't know why it happened, and they'll then lobby to try to put them back. For example, that happened a few years ago. So we're missing the public budget process that should exist, and hopefully we're going to get back to that one day. But right now, it's gone.
I just wanted to say that what you talked about in terms of the key factor is the teacher is in fact supported by a body of research that looks at the factors that most influence outcomes. There's a ton of correlation research that's not causative, and then there's a small body of good educational research that actually looks at what factors impact, and the quality of the teacher is more important than all of the other factors combined. And again, people hear that and they sometimes think, well, that's blaming the teacher. That's not my intent in any extent. But having said that, if that's what the research says, that's the most important factor, then the programs should be supporting good teacher behavior and discouraging bad teacher behavior. And again, getting back to the question is to say, well, we have all of these programs. Which ones have been set up so we can learn from them? To what extent do they buttress good behavior from teachers, and to what extent are they counterproductive and actually discourage the behaviors that we want in teachers? And my guess is, the answer is, all of these programs we have we have not learned anything, and we are now deploying more programs without any hope of learning from them either.
Yeah, and it might be that some more money needs to go into chapter 1 to make the teachers better, to reward the best teachers, and to do the opposite to the teachers that are not doing well. And then you'll need fewer programs to do all these other things. But that again is way beyond, that would be like a discussion, a philosophical. But I do know that I stood in front of 60 people or 80 people one time, and one of them was in high school and the rest were adults. And I made the statement that it takes under an hour to walk through school and pick out the 5 best classes. You don't even have to go in the classroom, you just have to peek and look for a second. And I looked as I was saying it, and all the adults are going, and the high school teacher, high school kids going, It takes 1 week for every parent to know which are the good teachers and which are the bad teachers from their kid, and their kid is right. It's amazing. I'm going to stop.
Okay, or was there another question?
I had a question with what you were just saying. What hit me was, have the other schools analyze that kind of situation? In other words, you're saying put some more emphasis on the teachers, which I think is a good concept, and maybe less on the other. Have other school system made a comparison on kind of along what he was saying? You know what I'm trying to say? In other words,
When I would visit all these myriad of schools, it's so hard to say there's one way to say it quickly, but if somebody said this school is really doing good, and you have to guess what they're doing, and I had to guess and try
okay,
to
so
be
there
right.
wasn't any.
I would say they have longer hours of teaching for the kids that are struggling. They're coming in on Saturday, they're coming in after school, and number two, they concentrate on making their teachers really good.
So the
Beginning
teachers
with
key.
classroom management, and every single child knows when they come in there, they're going to be working, or there's going to be immediate consequences. And it would be right almost every time. And they never had fancy programs that they brought up or anything like that.
Did you just describe a chocolate school?
I described, the most interesting one was Citizens Academy in Cleveland, which reversed the achievement gap. And I asked him, what did you do? And I just love his answer. Well, we promised all this stuff, and after the first year, we failed. But after the second year, we only failed a little. And then we tweaked this, and he said, about the fourth year, we were meeting all our goals, and then we just kept getting better. In other words, he didn't know. He just knew that, well, then we added a Saturday class. Then we did this better. Then we taught our teachers to do this. And it just all came together. And it wasn't, we did a flower program. So, I had some other examples, and we've been up here long, that would say, why aren't we asking these questions, like how many succeeded doing this, why there were 8,000 applications for Head Start, only 620 accepted. What does that mean? But
Thanks a lot, Ed. Okay, well, I'll catch us up because once again, this is chapter 5, which is a large chapter, and I apologize. We didn't really have someone to do the analysis, so I'll just kind of go through it. This is special education and student services, and I know it's a big issue, and again, I apologize, but we don't have all the volunteers that we could use. So this is a very, very large department, and in listening to the other chapters, it seems like some of this is duplicative. It just seems like the school system is just adding and adding and adding programs, patchwork and Band-Aids is what it kind of sounds like. And so this is where the focus should be, the special education and student services. And their budget that they're proposing for FY16 is $354,106,533. So $354 million and quite a bit extra. Well, how many students?
17,500.
Thank you. You could probably take this too. So it's an increase of about $16 million for the coming year. And it's a massive department, and it includes the Division of Business, Fiscal, and Information Systems. So it's almost like they have their own business management system. And then a medical assistance program, which it's special needs, and that's understandable, but I think a few people said before that there are other county agencies that also perform this service for people. So, there's that. And then the Department of Special Education Services Placement and Assessment Services Unit, School-Based Services, Special Schools and Centers. There's a division for pre-K, special programs, and related services. There's the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education. And then there's the program for infants and toddlers, pre-K special ed programs, and Interact. And then finally, there's a Department of Student Services. So it's massive, and I can give you some examples of their performance measures, which, as we've heard before, just kind of throw out percentages or numbers, but they don't map back, so you don't really know how successful they are. Here's one example. Performance measure to reduce the number of complaints filed with the Maryland State Department of Education that result in findings of violations. So in FY14, there were 10 complaints. FY15, they estimate there will be 7, and they're recommending 5 for the FY16 fiscal year. And there's no way to really, you know, in a budget to kind of figure out. Nevertheless, okay, so here's a, you know, and here's another performance measure to increase the percentage of successful special ed mediation sessions by working cooperatively with parents and advocates and implementing effective dispute resolution processes, which is, you know, admirable. And the performance measures were FY14 75%, FY15 85%, and the recommended for FY16 88%. But we really don't know what those numbers mean or how many people, students or families were involved in this. So it's kind of hard to track it back. So I guess, as I said, this is a really important chapter, and I would encourage you to go through it. And if Gordy or anybody has anything to contribute, but basically, what you read, what you see with these chapters, and what we learn at these sessions that we do is so much of it is duplicative, and so much of it seems to kind of be, well, there's federal money this year for a program, so we're going to start a program and use the $75,000 that we get from the feds. And then when that money ends, then that program goes away. And there's not any kind of sustainability in these programs, and they're kind of all over the map. So anyway, so the next chapter is Jim's F. And Jim is also the one that we want to say thank you. He's our first vice president in the Civic that he's videotaping, as well as the one that's running the computer. So thanks, Jim.
Well, folks, I'm really a stranger in paradise here. I have to openly admit that we're homeschooling our cats. So, so a lot of this stuff is foreign to us. Anyway, when I looked at the sign-up sheet and whatnot, I noticed that this chapter had not been taken by anybody. My background is a program evaluator. I've worked for 2 local United Ways in other parts of the country, as well as worked with the federal government doing performance measurements and whatnot for a community-based crime control program that operated about 700 communities around the country. The sort of school of thought in terms of program evaluation that I come from is what's called utilization-based evaluation. I mean, there are some folks that are into evaluation for the academic interests and other people for other kinds of things and whatnot, but kind of one of the people that's one of my mentors is that why do this stuff if you're not producing useful information for decision making? So this was kind of interesting to me, and so real quickie here, the Office of Shared Accountability, total expenses in their proposed FY16 budget here of about $4.6 million. It's a decrease of about 1.6% over the prior year, which is sort of interesting when everything else is going up. The reason for this is apparently one of the projects or something that they were doing in the previous year has come to an end. And so that's the reason for the decrease, is that it's just a project's not there anymore. As far as the percent of the total budget, it's about 0.2%, so it's kind of a blip on the horizon here, rounding error in the whole scheme of things of MCPS. The total amount of staff full-time equivalents here is 4.15, decrease of about 1.2%, or it's a half a position or whatever that they're losing. And again, it's about 2% of the overall MCPS budget.
Jim, could I trouble you to just define what that office does?
Well, that's what I'm getting to right here. Their major functions, they have a general administration with about 8 FTEs. They do testing, which has about 9 FTEs. That's all the, state testing, as well as some of the other SAT type testing and whatnot. There's an applied research unit, has about 4.5 FTEs, and the way they describe that is that it's conducting research to identify and understand factors that influence student outcomes and perceptions of school quality, including the production of extensive research reports and academic indicators and standardized tests that support data-driven decisions, making school improvement and academic achievement. So, you know.
Is that one month?
Yeah. So, you know, all the stuff that you've been talking about as far as closing the gap and making sure that our billions of dollars are going to something, well, there we go. We got 4.5 FTEs that are working on that. Let's see, there's the program evaluation unit, which is also looking at a number of these activities that are going on, some of the special programs and other things that the school system has undertaken, and they are attempting to identify what the outcomes are of some of those experimental programs, the idea that the structure will be improved on the basis of some of the evaluation findings. And there's the reporting group. Your younger days, remember when you were acting out and whatnot, and they told about, well, if you keep doing this, it's going on your permanent record. Well, these are the people that keep that permanent record. And we have 3.6 FTEs of people somewhere in the cubbies of MCPS keeping down who's been naughty or nice. So that's where your permanent record is. Policy and records, these are people that ensure that MCPS's forms and other things are in compliance with federal, state, and other regulations and other kinds of stuff that goes on in terms of feeding the bureaucratic machine. And lastly, then we have the internal audit people. So these are the people who are probably checking things like these school board members' credit card receipts and other things.
Yeah. The internal audit, they're just doing the local schools' student fund accounts. That's what that office is, if I'm reading it right. But yeah, that should be just that's just the auditing of the local schools.
Yeah, the discretionary funds and other things like that.
No, it's not discretionary. It's like football fees, course fees, stuff like that. Whatever money the principal handles, they audit the local schools, and that's probably the 4 people.
Well, they claim here it's financial program audits of funds appropriated by MCPS, as well as funds within the independent activity fund of individual school sites.
That's individual, IAF funds, yeah.
Okay, so that would get into the school board credit card reports.
No, that was us.
Well, we got 4 people to do that. So basically, that's how the 42 FTEs are split across those various functions.
That was our public information.
Now, as an evaluator, we're going to point out that there's kind of 2 major types of performance measures. One is what are called activity and process measures. So those are kinds of things like, you know, how many meals are served and how many parking tickets are issued, those kinds of things, which are usually easily reported on by most agencies because these are their operational kinds of functions, and so they have that kind of information. But one of the problems, of course, is that for most people, what they want to do is find out what the results are, which are more outcome results measures. So there you get into things like, you know, how many children might have been adopted, are you reducing traffic accidents in your area, perhaps reducing juvenile offender recidivism, those kinds of things, because that's what's meaningful as far as is the money that's going for these activities resulting in positive benefits for the community or the agency that it's doing its job, that it's not just spinning wheels and whatnot. So usually for most public agencies, the last part here is the hardest to get because of the nature of the activities of these agencies, where they either have very limited contact, where either a client comes into the office and you issue a permit or you do some sort of thing and they're out the door. And so in terms of how well that activity has benefited their life or resulted in them being a better citizen or whatever else, most agencies can't do that without very expensive tracking. A friend of mine was actually involved in a project in Chicago where that's what they did, was track kids for 10 years, wherever they went. And one of the problems that they had with this was that they actually were in violation of state stalking laws by tracking these people. So it's very difficult in terms of financial as well as legal liabilities to track people for most of these kinds of things. But for the school system, they've got these kids for years. They have, not only are they delivering services, but they are constantly doing assessments and tests and other kinds of things. So to me, that's kind of one of the things is that of the kinds of public agencies that I've dealt with, that schools are the most blessed as far as having that kind of opportunity to be able to track what they're doing and measure in some kind of way the effects that they're having long-term in terms of this, and also because of a school system this size, being able to compare. You have either like treatment groups, control groups, or whatever, so that you can also do those kinds of comparisons as to what your effectiveness is. So anyway, as far as the Office of Shared Accountability, they've got a whole page list of accomplishments. I've just extracted out a couple of these. So it's like policy, regulatory requirements related to federal, state, and local mandates, requests for outcome evaluations of major reforms, oversaw development of early warning indicators to dropouts, administered tests, and processed over 10,000 diplomas. So, what type of performance measures are being produced here? Yeah, how busy are you? Is that what you're...
Jim, if I can elaborate.
Yeah.
So, a small but very hardy group within this office is internal audit. Every internal audit organization on the planet, except for this one, reports annually on how much money their audits have saved.
To that fact,
why are we so exceptional?
Yeah, the Federal Government Accountability Office, GAO, they do an annual report, and one of the things that they claim, how correct it is, however, is that the various studies and recommendations that the GAO staff do result in certain estimated savings per year in terms of federal government activities. I used to work in the criminal justice field, and agencies there will do studies where that's one of the things they're looking at is not only recidivism, but perhaps savings in terms of like correctional expenditures because they've been able to place people out into other kinds of settings and use less expensive interventions to deal with them, those kinds of analyses as outcomes for their activities. But what we have here are a page of this kind of, yes?
And I think it's mainly for Gordon. When you say no other, that every other
internal audit function
group does this, do you mean other boards of ed? Howard
Yeah.
County, Frederick County?
Yeah, everywhere internal audit. This is their trophy wall. They tell you every year how much money
So every board
they
of ed
save.
does it except ours.
And the reason why they do this is they know there are staff functions that are in jeopardy of going away the next time there's a budget cut. So they want to show you how much money they save, not these guys.
Well, and the other thing in these audits, they no longer contain any numbers. That years ago, I think about 5 or 6, they did have numbers, and that's when we found out that the Churchill principal was $220,000 in the hole. After that big explosive audit was made the post.
These are sanitized reports.
Yeah, now they're sanitized. There's no numbers in them, so you don't get any numbers.
I was just going to add, they don't even have to be sanitized anymore if their objective is compliance with internal control requirements and compliance with IDEA and NLCB, all the different things. Then you're just saying check, complied, and there is no dollar figures. Not check, not complied.
We heard a lot about outcome measures through the whole evening. This is our hope. These are the guys that should be saying to the superintendent, you cannot roll out that program without having a control group or randomization. And the director of this office has had an interesting history. Most of them, one of them is in jail. One of them went from this position to superintendent and was virtually immediately fired, and et cetera. So we've had, in recent years, we have, the person in charge there has not been the beacon of hope to help the superintendent
Well, a few years ago, I was looking at some of the evaluation reports produced by this office, and I noticed that it seemed to be a revolving door between the University of Maryland and here. And so one year, the staff person for the OSA office would be supervising consultants from UWM. The following year, that OSA supervisor would be over at the UM, and one of the UM consultants would be over here at OSA. So they kept trading places every year or so, and so it just sort of seemed like, I guess, I don't know if they're keeping each other employed or what the deal is on this, but yeah. And as some people have already mentioned, I mean, there is other outcome data in terms of, if you explore the MCPS website, in terms of results from various tests that are taken, graduation rates, and so there is data being produced, which was kind of surprising to me that here there wasn't any relationship in terms of these activities and saying improvements in either graduation, test taking, or something being tied to this kind of activity. But yeah, it took so much digging and rummaging through all the different parts of the website to find this kind of information and whatnot, that the thought I guess I would leave you with is, you've heard the term about being too big to fail. And I've worked with federal agencies, state agencies, local government agencies around the country and whatnot, and this is an amazing bureaucracy that we have in this school system. And it began to occur to me that maybe what's happened with MCPS is they're too big to succeed.
Okay, on that note.
Well done, Jim.
Thank you.
Jim. So I'm pinch hitting again for the Chapter 7, which is the Office of Community Engagement and Partnerships. And this is the office that does do the linkages to learning and all the community partnerships and outreach in the community. And the entire budget is somewhat over $3 million, $3,167,686 proposed for FY16, and that's an increase of $150,038. And I'll just read again some of the performance measures because this seems to be a pattern that's emerging this evening. One is performance measure, families formally served with linkages to learning. In FY14, there were 1,600 families. FY15, which is now estimated at 1,700, and the recommended for FY16 is 1,850. But we don't really know how many families should be served with linkages to learning, or have this, identified specific students who it would help to reach out via this program.
Ike refuses to do a performance review.
Okay.
It's in Ike's budget, he won't do it.
Oh, it's already, okay, all right.
He won't do it.
Yeah, so a number of this is, for example, performance measure, number of study circles. So FY14 was 37, FY15 estimated at 40, and they're recommending 43 for the new budget. But again, we don't really know how successful the study circles are. We don't know how many there ought to be, so just kind of constantly increasing it, what does that benefit the children? So I'll leave it at that, and then we can move along because we're getting short here. And Gordy was going to come up and do chapter 8.
I gave you a handout that had 4 pages. I'm going to talk about the third page. This is the big overhead center. The chief operating officer's budget. He's now our interim superintendent of schools, Larry Bowers. He has built this organization up over decades, and he's proud of it. Don't expect any cuts in overhead over the next 3 months. Observations from the top. This is over half the overhead. It's not all the overhead by any means. But just to give you the big picture, if you add all the other overhead pools, you end up with a total overhead rate of 46%. Now, I'm the owner of this rate. Nowhere is the overhead rate for the school system published. Nowhere. And I don't think it's something that we manage. I doubt that we even know what it is within MCPS. And I'm saying that somewhat rhetorically, but it's not something we manage. We don't manage overhead. We don't try and reduce overhead to increase the amount of money that goes into instruction. Rather, we try and increase the money in both categories, year after year after year, through an incremental budget process. But I challenge the school system to compare itself on its overhead costs to any other school system in the nation. And that's a benchmarking process that becomes standard with the kind of independent review of the school system's costs that we've recommended. I think it's one reason why the school system is rather slow to endorse the idea. Salary costs within the chief operating officer's budget are wide in range, and that's this section down here. I'll just take you to the numbers. So right down here, you see we have a professional staff that's small. These are the big cheeses. They're paid a lot of money, no question about it. A few administrative folks, they're paid well. On the business side, a few more people, they're paid well. And then a ton of support people. These are the hard-working, blue-collar folks that do the heavy lifting. These are the guys that maintain the buses, that fix the furnace. They're paid a much smaller number. You see that we're asking for wage increases for everybody. But the observation is that there's a wide range here. And what is curious to me is that these folks here, these 35 folks, together with some of these folks, get involved in the salary negotiations. Have they been completed for this year with the unions?
We're in a 3-year set of contracts. This is the second year.
All right, and we're still in process in these negotiations?
No, they're completed.
Oh, okay. Well, these folks were involved in that process. And they, like all the other MCPS employees, benefit from the results of those negotiations. Those contracts govern not just teachers. Those govern all these wonderful people. There is a conflict of interest. Like all the other budgets, observation number 3, there doesn't seem to be any productivity or benchmark data to justify the cost. And I give you an example. We have a huge fleet of buses. You see them in the motor pools around the county. They're one of the reasons why schools opened late today.
No, they're closed today.
Closed today, that's right.
They changed it,
Yeah, at 5 a.m. it was 2 hours,
Yeah.
and 6:30 it was closed. Why do we have 1,258 buses? I asked that not rhetorically. I can't answer that question. Fairfax County's school budget tells me the answer. They have a certain number of buses that they need on the road every day to get kids to and from school, and they know a percentage of the buses in the fleet are going to be out for maintenance, and they know what the routes look like, and they've optimized those. They need so many buses. I have no idea why we have the number of buses we have.
We have it because there's so many the kids aren't going to their neighborhood schools anymore. They're being bused all over the place.
Right. That's a big part of it. We
But
have
he's saying they
special
don't
programs
justify, you're saying they
around.
don't justify it, right? You're just saying there's nothing in there to give you any detail.
Got no
Yeah.
answers.
Right.
Fringe benefits are a big part of this budget, if I can. The total budget is $880 million, but a big part of that is fringe and benefits. 600 out of the 900 or so is fringe. So we've centralized the accounting for all that money in this budget. So only about 300 million is actually this office. And this number in the program budget gets distributed across all of the programs that are outside of this budget. But for purposes of accounting and control, it's all centralized here. And you can see that's a big part of the increase. We have benefits for current and retired employees. Yes, ma'am.
The problem I've always had with the COO budget is
Yeah.
that huge amount under D, the 597 million.
Yeah.
It's a one line, it's a line item.
Yeah.
I wonder if the schools would be willing to allocate them across the other chapters, because otherwise it really doesn't tell you
Right.
much.
Well, it does. They do that in the program budget.
Oh, they do the
So
program.
this is the organization
Okay.
budget, but the program budget, which I briefly introduced a while back, and probably confused everybody, that's separate from the organization budget. And it cuts across the organizations. So that's why you saw, when I was talking about the program budget, you saw some special ed stuff, even though that's separate from the standard education budget. All that stuff, all those programs include their fair share of this number. So you see that way.
So
And honestly,
fully loaded.
right, and we should be managing programs, not organizations. If you want to manage outcomes, you don't manage organizations, you manage programs. And I think that's been a consistent theme. While we're in the depths of the numbers, you see the organization does a variety of things that are all important in terms of basic blocking and tackling. We've got Green County activities, we maintain the buildings, and we've got operations day to day. A lot of these people are directly on site in the schools. Transportation, those buses have to be driven. And yes, we do have more drivers than we have buses. Food, we have a lot of people in the cafeterias, a lot of them on site, some in central locations. And then we have an agglomeration of other activities, construction management, materials management, all that's off-site. We also have a category, this is a trick that bean counters like me know how to use. When you give me budget cut, I move people into capital, because that's a separate budget item. And we have a very healthy capital budget in the school system. And those of you that attended the December meeting of the Taxpayers League were present when the vice president of the school board, who's in charge of the capital budget, told us that he doesn't manage it. And he's not sure who does.
Doesn't manage it.
But I can tell you this, that it's a big budget, it's not big enough, and we all know that the state has been meager in terms of the amount of resources it gives our county for new schools. We'd like to see more. But it is an area that, when you look at budgets, you always want to look at capital, because when the toothpaste tube gets squeezed up here, the toothpaste comes out here. Okay, in terms of the numbers, this budget is inflated by the $600 or so million in benefits, but that's the big number. There's a variety of folks paid a range of numbers. Contracts are about the same as last year. Supplies unchanged. A big bump in benefits. This is the Pac-Man that's eating us alive. We have very generous benefit programs, and in every organization, you're going to see benefits growing substantially. We're up.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You have like closing remarks or,
Okay.
yeah, because we're, it's like almost a quarter after.
Right, I think we've covered all these points, aren't we?
Okay, thanks. Okay. So, I'll quickly do chapter 10, just very.
How about chapter 9?
Oh, sorry. I guess I need chapter 9. I've been waiting and waiting. Civic then. Well, so this is my first Budgetpalooza. I've never been to one before, and I've never looked at the MPs and Montgomery County Public School budget before. So, Paula seemed to be in trouble with finding people to cover, so I said I'll do it. So I picked information technology because I had a career as a librarian, and I worked a lot with technology. But I'm not a budget analyst, so this will probably be short. I was going to ask Jim to put the organizational chart up when you get a chance.
Yeah.
And I don't have a handout, but I did want to put up on the screen the organizational chart, because I'm going to come back to that at the end when I talk about my observations. So the Office of the Chief Technology Officer covers all of the hardware and software and applications that can churn out whatever kind of report or analysis or number crunching anyone could possibly ever want or imagine, but I guess it sounds like they just don't do it. So I did not take an inventory of all the different applications, but I might go out and do this. I was listening to you guys. I thought, oh, I should have gone back and looked at this or evaluated that. But the Office of the Chief Technology Officer has 4 departments and 2 divisions. They have 153 staff, which is actually down 3 from last year.
their budget is 26.7 million. You mentioned 46 million, so I don't know where you got that number. Well, this is just chapter 9 is 26.7 million. So maybe there's some IT money tucked away someplace else. Like, I don't think they want the Chromebooks out of this budget. But I'm not really sure. You know, they don't give you a lot of detail on what they spend their money on.
Reversing.
26.7 million is 142,000 less than last year, and that's probably because they have 3 fewer staff. You lose staff and your budget goes down. And everything else pretty much stayed the same. And I'll note a few changes in my observations. So the office of the IT large office, they manage and administer student systems. They collect and analyze data for decision making. They design, they develop, they administer technology in support of teaching and learning. They manage the Center for Technology Innovation, which is MCPS's primary technology training facility for staff. I noticed in one of the department breakdowns that they have a line item where they pay staff a little bit extra to do the training in the summer. It's you know, they go for an extra week or two and they earn a little extra money. That amount actually went down because they say they're training fewer teachers. Now that can't be because less technology is being introduced, because when you look at the accomplishments and initiatives of the 4 different departments, there are many, including my MCPS. There's a new scheduling system that was launched at my son's school. My son, do you go to BCC or no? Rockwell. Okay, it was launched at BCC. So there's all kinds of new technology always coming out, and it caught my eye that there's less money spent to train the teachers. They automate business tasks in support of education system. They even came up with a new program for managing the amounts parents pay, these fees that parents pay to individual schools for whatever program or field trip or SAT class or whatever. They have help desk, technology installation, training, lots of training. They manage the whiteboard, the Promethean program, and now there are added, mobile devices and tablets that are supposed to work with all the Promethean whiteboards, and they're implementing all of that. There's a new program called, a new application called My MCPS, which is an intranet for teachers and staff that allow collaboration and grade management. The grade management tool had to be reworked so it matches the curriculum 2.0 requirements. The chief technology officer also supports the school media centers and their application, which is Destiny, and it's called Destiny. It's a inventory and collection management system. And they also manage the access to the different digital resources and research databases. They do the HR systems, school bus management, everything. So in the last year, when they talk about the different accomplishments and initiatives of the different departments, they're not contextual like everybody is saying. It's not really evaluative. The performance indicators I thought were not really demonstrative of what this huge IT operation should be doing. A lot of the performance measures have to do with help desk success. How many questions did we receive and how many questions did we answer successfully? How many people did we train? And after the training, you fill out your evaluation form and how many people said that they achieved the learning objectives. And that's as far as they go in the training classroom. So, I didn't really see any place where they're saying, gosh, our Chromebook implementation is really working, and maybe that's done someplace else, and we're raising learning. My son, again, he's a junior at BCC. He says the Chromebooks are a distraction. They share them. Students share them. A lot of technology impediments, and you probably have an experience too.
Yeah, my school, the social studies department, those classes have them, but the Wi-Fi sucks. So
like only half the students in the class can use the Chromebook. So I don't know why they're trying to add more and more Chromebooks when they should be working on.
They are working. They are working on the Wi-Fi. So
Chromebooks don't work. They don't
Wow.
work.
So they got ahead of themselves.
Yeah.
yeah, I think they did. All elementary schools have whiteboard technology. There were 540 professional development work sessions. There's a new data warehouse. Hans Reamer introduced the open data legislation last year, and MCPS is participating in that and making more and more data available. Maybe some of you have seen it. I'm just going to pull out a couple of outdated resources were canceled, so I thought that was a good sign. There was something called Safari Books Online, which was a subscription to books that could help teachers with technology. The teachers didn't use the books, they just went out to Google and found what they were looking for, so they canceled that. Also, they were using Blackboard. Are you all familiar with Blackboard online courses? I guess they're done with that now. And they're moving to Google and SharePoint. Let's see if there's anything else notable here. Under the new scheduling system, the IT section supports extended school year home and hospital programs for special needs kids, so they can have timely access to services. Okay, the new school financial management software for independent activity funds. They developed that this last year. The travel budget was not significant. I think mostly the chief technology officer's office and his two divisions, they use most of the travel money, which is a small percentage of the total budget, 65,000. Well, I mean, you know, one thing they do is they're always looking for new things, and then of course they go to conferences and learn how other people have implemented some of these.
Yeah, there was the year he did it backwards though. He went to the Promethean conference before he bought the Promethean board. So
The
that
one
was
in
backwards.
London? That
Yeah,
one?
the one in London, yeah. Then he had to pay the money back. Yeah. Did it backwards.
All right, well, they don't talk about competition, they don't talk about the individual contractors. You know, I printed this out really small. I wanted to note the contractual services and consultants. That totals $5.6 million out of a $26 million budget.
On
So that's an
consultants?
addition.
5.6 million on consultants?
On contracts and consultants.
Really?
Yes, in addition to the 152 staff.
Who are we hiring back?
So I don't know. I looked at the salaries, because I think, who was it that was just looking at salary? I think you weren't. Who was looking at salaries just now?
I look at
Gordon was, okay, so.
I'm envious.
I did some quick math while you were talking. 152 staff in the IT shop, 107 are the support services, and they make an average of $87,700 a year. The professionals make an average of $119,000. The business operations and admin folks make $114,000. There are 14 administrative staff, which make $140,000 average each.
Right. Yeah.
So, let me skip to my observations. One is about just the organization of the IT shop. You've got the chief technology officer, and then you've got these 4 different departments, each who have between 20 and 30 people. But then, if you look at, notice their names. You've got Department of Instructional Technology, Infrastructure, and Operations, especially those 2. Okay. If you go to the, did you do the other slide, Jim, or no?
Yeah, just page down.
All right. So the chief technology officer himself has 2 divisions, and each of these have about 20 to 22 people in them. Division of Technology Support and Division of Instructional Information Services, well, they basically do the same thing as some of these departments. And when you look at accomplishments and initiatives, they're claiming the same activities.
They all take credit.
Yeah,
Or-
well, I think you're looking at a central problem, and that's a pun. The central office is huge and getting bigger, but we've decentralized a lot of stuff. And this is an organization that needs a fresh, independent look at the overhead.
So it's not that they have too many people, perhaps, because I think 153 IT folks for such a huge system is probably not enough, and then the contractors. But maybe they can get rid of some of the supervisory level staff.
Well, in this
or reprogram.
organization, you have to look at the fact they've just implemented 2 major ERP systems, and they probably have a lot of people on the payroll that were there for the implementation that are no longer needed.
That could be, but we don't know for sure. Okay, so that was one observation. Another one is there is a document called the 2014 to 2016 Strategic Technology Plan. Okay, I'll wrap up. And I took a look at that to see if it, aligned with the IT budget. And I noticed a couple of goals for the Strategic Technology Plan. One was to develop a sustainable funding plan for technology. I don't know, what does that mean, a sustainable funding plan, that it funds itself or, what, but it's not mentioned in the budget at all. Another one, and I think this is linked to the Chromebook, the tablet program, a 70% reduction in print instructional texts by 2016. So then I tried to see how much they spend on textbooks, but that is a little bit of a hard number to come by because I think it's in various chapters. And I looked on the Q&A on the website, and one of the board members actually asked that question, how much do you spend on textbooks? Because it wasn't obvious in the budget. And there was an answer, but it didn't say how much they spent last year, or the year before, or the year before. So, is there a 70%? But there can't be. If the tablets aren't working, the Chromebooks are not working, they cannot reduce the print text by 70%. That's huge. That's a huge goal for
Except that
a
they're
2 or
going through
3
this
year.
Pearson curriculum, and that's online. So the elementary schools, I don't think, have textbooks anymore.
Right. It's quite feasible to me they could reduce the spending of 70% on textbooks. What's hidden from that is that they're spending almost exactly the same amount on licenses for electronic copies.
Right. So they don't
you
say.
don't save the money. The costs are.
Well, they don't say they're going to spend 70% less. They're going to say they're going to reduce the number.
Right, I can do that.
Of print textbooks.
Yeah, but as I say, there's no.
Just shift the
I would be
cost.
surprised if there were a net savings.
Shift the cost.
Okay, so I guess that's those are the highlights of.
Thanks very much. Good job.
I just had a question. Gordy, can I ask you this question?
Sure.
So, like in this office, I know that the chief technology officer has a take-home car. Where do you find that in the budget? Do you know?
I've never seen it.
Take
That's an
home
excellent
car.
question.
Okay, that.
I didn't see any vehicles.
Is that by salary?
Transportation.
And then
Yeah.
one more, the other question.
Well, it's a general question, I don't know who we go to. Is any effort made to do comparative salary studies? For example, a chief technology officer, there are lots of them in other companies. Any effort made to say, here's the average, here's what we pay?
No. Although, of all the functions in the central office, this is the one that's most competitive. This is the one, curriculum designers, dime a dozen. They're all paid lots of money. They're all paid over $100,000 a year. But these guys are hard to get. This is a very competitive.
Okay, but looking at the others, is there comparative salary
No,
figures?
no. You're not going to find any benchmarking in the budget. No comparisons.
There is a document though for WB Washington area Board of
Right.
Education, WABE.
Right,
And
yeah,
I think that has all the surrounding jurisdictions, but I don't know how far they drill down.
not this far.
We have to kind of move on this. Stands up. I just want to say, we'll skip over chapter 10, which is the Office of Human Resources and Development. And so they're the ones that hire teachers, manage teachers, provide additional education and so forth for the teachers, or they do the outreach. So, just quickly, their annual budget that they're proposing is $18,769,312, and that is an increase of $548,576. And one, interestingly, one of their performance evaluation clients, tasks that they do is conduct pre-employment background checks. And there's been some information about that in the paper and on the media.
A little bit.
So that's interesting. But again, it's just like what Jean was saying, the performance measures are percentage of employees who indicate satisfaction after using employee assisted services. And, you know, the performance measures really aren't that helpful, I have to say. Okay, so Stephen, thank you.
Sir?
All yours.
You get the document up and we'll see it, otherwise there's a summary. So I was looking at chapter 11, which is the Board of Education and the Office of the Superintendent. And, oh boy, big bucks, 6.7 million, so 0.3%. Bother. In the Board of Education, it's split, I don't know why it's in one chapter, there seem to be two completely separate things. The Board of Education is Department 711, there's just nothing to worry about. No change there at all. In the Office of Superintendent, that's the only significant differences there from one year to the next is it seems to be there was a separate Office of Legal Counsel that was spun off into a separate department, so 611 last year and all previous years, as of 2016 becomes Department 611 and 610. That's an increase of 354,000 of salaries, but contractual costs which coming up about $500,000. And that $500,000, they say, actually came out of the budget of the Office of the Chief Operating Officer. The Office of the Chief Office of the Chief Operating Officer is so big, you hardly notice a $500,000 decrease there. So
Yeah, I think that's the contract for the study of school choice.
is that it?
That they've got
Oh,
the
is that what it
RFP on the
is?
street for it.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, that's a big number
And
there.
I'll bet you the bid's coming twice now.
Really? Okay. And then the salaries alone the average salaries were, I think we should be careful just looking at changes over 2015 because of this whole issue of stuff getting baked in. So since they give me 2014 numbers as well, we'll look at those. So the average salaries in 2014 were 87,000. 2016, 130,000, 120,000. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. Very good reason for it. And then the other thing, the only other change of note was within Office of Communications, where they say they support staff, they do the Twitter feed. Has anybody in this room, I've yet to meet anybody who actually uses Twitter for value.
Yes, are you kidding?
Really?
Killer app, yeah, I'm not just serious.
Not just, but I mean, but you know,
Other than my
The
own,
thing-
you know, we
the
have a
thing
marketing
that's happening with
communications department.
MCPS
Anyway,
is a bunch of people are coming up with their fake MCPS accounts on Twitter. So now there's all these competing Twitter, which has created all kinds of
well, there's a
confusion.
apparently there's a Twitter feed and a homework hotline and stuff like that. So the bulk of the increase in the cost here, don't worry, you with. Thanks. The bulk of the increase there was a transfer in of 5 ESOL staff who have been put into the Office of Communications. Previously they were in the division of the ESOL and bilingual program, so now they're communications, and the reason they're there is they're saying, well, I guess the division of ESOL and bilingual programs is actually helping kids in the school. Within the Office of Communications, they're actually taking those people and using them to translate the documents which need to be made available to the parents and that sort of thing. And apparently the biggest language that's coming up is Amharic, which is now apparently half as important as Spanish translations. So they say. And increasing salaries over 2014, 6%. And then there's the Instructional Television Special Revenue Fund
Thank you.
Thank you. And so Ed is coming back up, is that right, to do the appendices?
I found nothing of important. I looked at it because I know I had signed up and then and then it was not easy.
Okay, well, so then,
We've been through a lot.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for attending, and there's plenty of food left over if people want to grab some. Thanks especially to all the people that volunteer. It's always really very, interesting and insightful to hear what everybody had to say. So it's a shame really that the Board of Education doesn't do this. Really have public sessions where they go through this budget, and it is a shame that so much is hidden still. This budget, I remember one year when I did this, just a quick anecdote, they had actually copied the same mistakes in spelling. They'd just been cutting and pasting from one budget to the next, and even the spelling mistakes have been cut and pasted into the budgets. That it just seems like it doesn't really matter.
Because salaries, they're not embarrassed? Professional?
Well, no, I don't think they probably know this.